Welcome to episode 4 of Fiction Friday. I'm Heather Shoemaker, author of books for kids and adults. This episode is dedicated to Elsa in Ohio. Hi, Elsa. She's read The Griffins of Castle Carey, and she said, I absolutely loved it. It's right up my alley. The suspense, adventure, mystery, and spookiness. And I actually met Elsa because she came to one of my bookstore events. She came to the Cover to Cover children's bookstore in Columbus, Ohio. And it's so fun to meet my readers. So when all this is over and we can go back to going to bookstores and you'd like me to come visit your bookstore, talk to them. I'd love to set up a visit so I can meet you too. Elsa has been enjoying Fiction Fridays, and she says, I'm writing a book of my own, and your Fiction Friday gives me some good tips. So great, I'm glad it does. I'm going to give you some more writing tips today, and I wonder if any of you have started writing your story for the Kids Write Fiction contest. I've heard from a couple people that they've already started writing a story. You have all of April, and you just have to be a kid. Preschool through high school. You can even write it with your siblings. So if you're stuck at home in a bigger group, you can team up to write a story. All right, to learn more about that, go to the Mystery to Me bookstore website and you'll find all the rules there. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my author, the way I became an author. And don't worry with your story if you can't spell. I was a terrible speller. In fact, I still have to look up a lot of words. So this is a book that I wrote in second grade. It was called Tom and the Magic Flower. You can see Tom, and there's his red flower, and it had an angel in the book. Well, I couldn't spell angel. I called her an angle. I couldn't spell a lot of words like wish or next. I had terrible trouble with the word next. I put the X in all over the place. So sometimes my stories were a little hard to read for somebody else, but I knew what they said. And eventually the letters in my spelling started to fall into the right order. And with a book like this, it's all stapled, but I just wrote a page a day. And after writing a page a day, my stories started getting bigger and bigger. So you might try that yourself. I wanted to read to you just a bit from my most recent book, The Griffins of Castle Carey. And this is the kids in the Griffins. There's 3 of them. They are Americans and they live in Minnesota, but they travel to England to visit their aunt where all sorts of exciting things happen. So I think it's important when you travel to a new place or you experience something new, like the very first day with a new teacher at school in a new classroom. You know, eventually when we get back to school, you'll have that. But when things are completely new, you notice everything. And so in this part of the story, Will is by himself and he's going into a church and he's noticing all the gravestones and how everything is different than at home. The church was silent. A hushed, expectant feeling pervaded the stone walls as Will's tennis shoes softly squeaked through the nave. To his left, a single candle flickered. As he walked, something made Will pause and look down. There was writing under his feet. He could see letters and dates chiseled into giant slabs of what looked like limestone and slate. The church's stone floor, which he thought was simply paving stones, was made entirely of graves. So that's something that I noticed when I was a kid. I lived in England for a year when I was 11, and we visited a lot of different places. And when you walk in some of the old churches, you notice that the floor you're stepping on is actually people's gravestones, which was a little bit different and freaky for me. But I loved reading the old stones. So I'm going to show you what these look like. I want to show you a picture of what these old stone graves look like. And there they are. You can just walk down. This is a cloister. You can just walk. Everything under your feet is actually a grave. All right, so here's another picture close up. And I really love seeing seeing the old writing, and it says in the end, he died in ye year, um, all the old ways of wording things. So this is the kind of thing, there's even a skull and crossbone at the top of that gravestone. This is the kind of thing that Will would see as he was walking down. And this is what's called, they call these big stones that you walk on, ledger stones. Ledger means something that you write on. All right, a couple things if you want to get better as a writer. One thing is to keep a journal. So this is whether you want to write fiction, where you make it all up, or nonfiction. You have to be a keen observer of life. And especially when things are new and different, I think it's really neat to write them down. So right now is a very strange time. Lots of new things and different things are happening in your life. And so it might be a great time to start a coronavirus school lockdown journal. All the things that are different than your normal day. What do the grocery stores look like? What does it feel like to wear a face mask if you wear one of those? What does it smell like? What is it like doing school remotely if you're meeting with your teachers online? Just writing down your thoughts and feelings and observations, and just write a sentence or two every day. And eventually you'll have a whole historical record that maybe someday you'll go back and look at if you're going to set a story during this coronavirus time. I did this when I was a child, when I was 11, when I lived in England. I wrote down, I kept a journal of my thoughts and feelings and observations of everything that was new and different when I lived in England. I grew up in Ohio, so a lot of things were really different to me. So try that. See what you think about keeping a journal. If nothing else, it will help you remember things. And that's what I think a writer does, is record little bits of life, little details that helps make the story feel very much alive. All right. I think it's time for my story cape. So let's see here. All right. Well, I haven't had any requests this week. So if you want me to pick a certain one, let me know. I'm just going to pick this yellow one here. This is really how I decided to set the Griffins of Castle Carey in England. Seeing all those strange gravestones and things made me wonder about their lives. Especially, there were a lot of graves that were for children, quite young children, who had died a long, long time ago. And I just wondered about their lives. And so I think that I wanted the Griffins kids, who are just made up children, to experience something new and be back in a country that has a lot of old stuff, old buildings, old graves all over the place. And that stirs up a lot of thoughts and wonders and ghosts in this case. I also wanted to share with you, this story idea, I think, started because I have a lot of aunts in England, and one of them sent me a picture of this gravestone. This is actually, it's a tomb, so it's a whole carving, and it's the grave of a little girl named Penelope. She was only 5 years old when she died, and my aunt visited the church where her gravestone is, and she sent me a whole letter about it. So I'm just going to tell you the story of Penelope, because it's a sad story, but sad stories sometimes stick in our hearts. And I think this is one of the reasons why I got interested in telling a ghost story, because I was wondering about the lives of the kids who lived long, long ago. So I'm just going to show you what this picture looks like. There she is, Penelope. And here's the letter that my aunt sent me. It's a very different kind of letter. It says, "Now I'm going to tell you the story of little Penelope Busbee. I met her last week when I was traveling about the country visiting very old churches. At least I didn't exactly meet her. She's been dead for almost 200 years, you see. But I saw where she was buried under the wonderful tomb that her mother and father built in her memory. Poor little Penelope was only 5 years old when she died. She was apparently very pretty and very clever. Her parents were very proud of her, too proud, in fact. They wanted her to see and do and learn everything. At the age of 5, she could speak, as well as English, Italian, French, and Latin. Well, it was all too much for her. She just lay down and died. Isn't that a sad story? But she looks very peaceful and happy in the picture, doesn't she? all curled up and fast asleep. And that, my dear, is the story of Penelope Busbee. The end. Have you ever gotten a letter like that telling you a story? Storytelling letters are quite nice, so maybe you could write a story and send it to somebody. That's an idea too. You know, stories, sad stories, as well as happy stories, are part of us. And right now, there's a lot of sad stories going on right now in the news. So if you have worries or questions about anything that's going on, make sure you ask somebody, your mom or dad or whoever it is that you trust, that you want to ask questions to. Because I think sometimes grown-ups think that kids wouldn't understand, or that they shouldn't be bothered with these kinds of problems. But we all share the world, and sometimes it's confusing, and you want to know something, you deserve to get an answer. So my thought is, if you're old enough to ask the question, you're old enough to get an honest answer. So if there's something you've been wondering about, just go ahead and ask. It's okay. All right, are you ready for today's joke? Why didn't the ghost, I've got to stick with the grave theme, why didn't the ghost go to the party? Why didn't the ghost go to the party? He had nobody to go with. Did you like that one? All right, I have a couple book recommendations to share with you. Two of the greatest books of all time. I really think these books people will still be reading 100 years from now. One is Tuck Everlasting. This is absolutely one of my complete favorite books. I read it for the first time when I was 8 years old. I think a lot of kids might enjoy it starting around 10. It depends on what kind of stories you like, what kind of reader you are. It's absolutely beautifully written. The story is, in some ways, a perfect story. It's about an 11-year-old girl, a toad, a family, something magical that everybody wants and nobody should have. And it's a book about death. Death is always with us, even when there's not coronavirus going on. Death is part of being alive. It's part of our life cycle, but that's very hard for us to accept. And this is the book that helped me accept death when I was 8 years old. It's just beautifully written. People say it is timeless. It's literally a timeless book. So if you haven't read, it's a very skinny little book, but it's very deep. And if you're a grown-up and you haven't read Tuck Everlasting, I recommend it to you. You'll really enjoy it. So that's one of the books that I think you'd like. Another one is called The Giver. Now, this book was written when I was already grown up. So I never got to read it when I was a kid. It was written when I was already in college. The main character is 12 years old. And I think this book is absolutely perfect if you're 12 and older. If you're a little bit younger, a lot of younger kids do read it. So if you want to read it when you're a little bit younger than 12, go ahead. But make sure that you read it again when you're older, because then you'll enjoy it at different levels. This is the kind of book that just transcends all time and is well worth everybody's time, no matter what age you are. So I hope you enjoy those two books. Now, Elsa asked me, are you going to write any other children's books? And the answer is yes. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of a sneak peek a little bit about my other books. So I'm writing 2 other books right now. One, you'll be happy to know, is a sequel to The Griffins of Castle Carey. It's right now it's called The Griffins and the Wild Hunt. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that one later. But I'm also writing a book about pirates. And this one is set back 300 years ago, because I just love history. I find it really interesting. It's about female pirates. So I've got out my pirate flag. You have to back up so you can see it. There we go, pirate flag. And I remember I was telling you about writing things in journals. Well, one of the things that I did when I got out of college was I worked on ships, and I kept journals. I worked on tall ships with sails and old-fashioned sailing. So this is the kind of thing that I wrote. I just wrote pages and pages of what it felt like to climb the rigging or furl the sails, and how I got seasick. All those things I put in this journal. And so now, years later, I'm using the observations that I wrote when they were still fresh in my mind to use for my characters in my pirate book. So you never know how you're going to use your journals. But if you get in the habit of writing down the things that you feel inside of you and the things that you see and experience in your life, then someday you can put those into your stories. Now, some of my friends heard that I was writing a pirate story, and so they sent me some pirate playing cards. Now, these are just pictures of pirates that are put into playing cards, but they're meant to look old-fashioned. And what's neat is the old cards, they look different than ours, don't they? And I wanted to show you, in my book, The Pirates Play Cards too, I wanted to show you what some of these look like. So there's Penelope again. Here's some old cards back from, our cards developed from the French suits. They got the hearts and the diamonds and the clubs and the spades. And so they even had legs. Look, they have the whole body of the king and the queen and the jack. I think that's pretty cool because now they don't have legs. They just have double heads. And do you see in the corner, they have names. So this king's name, it's written kind of sideways. King's name is David. And then next to him is Judith. And of course, they don't have the number for the clubs. You just have to count them up or memorize it. And the jack's name there is Hector. I think that's pretty cool. And so I looked into that a little bit. And look at this. The typical names for the kings, they all had names. The king's names, David, Alexander, Charles, and Caesar. And the queens and the jacks. One of the jacks was named Lancelot. I think it would be neat to figure out why they named the kings and queens and jacks these names. Some of them are definitely from the Bible. Some of them are heroes. So I wonder if you might like to look up and figure out, why did they name one of the queens Rachel? And why did they name one of them Palace? See if you can figure out if you're interested in that. Or maybe you're more interested in playing a game of cards. So that might be fun too. You can do so many things with cards, including magic tricks. All right, I wanted to remind you how to enter the contest. So you can send me a message if you'd like to tell me something about Fiction Friday, or maybe get a show dedicated to you. You can write to me through my website, heathershoemaker.com, or enter the contest. Go to mysterytomebooks.com, or send me a message on Facebook. So that's how you can get in touch. I would love to dedicate a show to you next time, or to hear what you think about the Griffins of Castle Carey, or to learn about your local bookstore, or maybe to hear what you thought about the old playing cards. Tell me what you think about all that. That would be fun. Well, Elsa, I hope you enjoyed your episode. It's so much fun to share this with you. And if you like Fiction Friday, why don't you send me a note, or maybe you could suggest a funny joke for next time. I'd love to hear what the jokes that you have. So subscribe so you don't miss a week, and share this with your teacher. I've been getting notes from teachers all over the country telling me how much they like the show. One teacher in Michigan said, "I just watched the first episode and I'm absolutely hooked." And a teacher from Oregon said, "This is amazing. I've been looking for ways to connect and share with my students." So wherever you are, from Oregon to Ohio, I know that I am thinking about you and wishing you well this week. That's all till next Friday. See you next time.